What is up, everybody? You already know who it is. It's your boy Z Money, and it is time for Zachetology. The playoffs are back. Another season is in the books. So let's talk about it. All right, we'll start with the little season wrap up, and then we'll get into the matchups. This season, nothing too crazy. We are firmly implanted in the 1A Jazz, 1B Sonics era. If I was going to sum up everything I'm going to talk about for the next half hour right now, the TLDR is that I think the finals will be the Sonics versus the Jazz in the Western Conference Finals. And there may be a little, I don't even know. Last year I was intrigued by the Nuggets beating the Sonics and maybe being that third team. But I just don't even know if I feel that way this season. So I'm really like, this season might literally just boil down to the Sonics versus the Jazz in the Western Conference Finals. And I don't even know how great a chance the Sonics have. They're a team that probably would be a champion in like a solid 30% of any, you pick a random year and they'd be championship quality. But the Jazz are just like, is this the best team we've ever seen? At least since I've been there. Maybe there are a couple other contenders, but the Jazz are that level. The Eastern Conference is just in shambles now that the Nets are gone. I love the Hawks as a great measuring stick for the conference because the Hawks have perennially been like 4-3. They might have even snuck a 2 seed in there, and they've always been awful in the playoffs. I just don't like their team for the playoffs. It doesn't feel like they're built for it. And the Hawks maybe look like the class of the East. I do think the Pacers will be like, that'll be a quality matchup, but I think the fact that the Hawks have just like done nothing and magically bubbled to the top are a good sign of the fact that the East is kind of going downhill. There have been some random pop-ups from random teams now that the Nets are gone, so people feel like the East is quote-unquote open. But I don't know if any of those teams are really going to make any noise. I'm talking about teams like the 76ers, the Magic. The Magic less so. Really, the 76ers are the big sellout team, and we'll talk about their matchups. In the West, we all knew the Sonics and the Jazz were going to be the number 1 and the 2 seed. In terms of anything exciting, we'll talk about the Timberwolves experiment. I think it kind of went how everybody expected. The Nuggets remained good despite losing Skeeter. I don't think they're as good as they are last season because, again, no Skeeter. But I thought the rails might fall off a little harder. And they put together a rock-solid season. Clear 3 seed. The Rockets obviously tanked mid-season. So they're a bit of a false 4-5, but could be interesting. Bryant can work a little magic. In terms of the conference as a whole, I think there are at least some seeds growing in the West for a future. The Rockets look like an exciting team in the future. The Clippers look like they might be a move away. The Nuggets, if they can use their cap space well, like I can see where the next era of the league will go when the Jazz and Sonics get fucking destroyed by contracts and their star players age out. In the East, it's not as clear. I think like there are a couple teams that might not be getting super old immediately, like the Heat. And then there are some teams that need to make a lot of moves, but at least have a little potential, like the Sixers, the Celtics, and the Nets. But we're probably going to need to see some like non-playoff teams make some big moves, like the Pistons, for the East to regrow into a real conference. All right. So with all that being said, let's get to the matchups. All right, starting from the bottom, we got the 1-seeded Hawks versus the 8-seeded Wizards. I did a little shit talking of how I hate the Hawks in the playoffs just a second ago. Look, this Hawks team is pretty uninspiring, mainly because we've seen it before. The one thing that I did learn as I was researching this that I found interesting is when you go down the Hawks and you look at all their players and their offensive capabilities, it's really uninspiring outside of Granny, right? Granny, classic 20. I think Granny's volume's down this season. He's only like a 22-point scorer. But Granny is like well over 60% true shooting, 20-some points per game. You love it. Everybody else, pretty unacceptable, mid-50s true shooting. But the Hawks are actually rocking the third best offense in the league. And you go, well, why the hell is that? I don't know what the Hawks have done. But they have a almost generational level of turnover reduction, turnover resistance. They don't turn the ball over, is what I'm trying to say. And it's crazy. They're like, they're ranked 1 by a insane margin. And traditionally, the way you usually think of good teams in the RBSL is that like the better you get, the worse your turnover problem is, but it just doesn't matter because your effective field goal percentage is just so fucking juiced. Not for the Hawks. So you look at all these terrible true shooting numbers, but because they never turn the ball over, they're actually like an offense equivalent to that of the 76ers and the Sonics, which is crazy. So as I don't know if the Hawks were like that every season up to this point, but definitely something interesting and maybe a sign that like there is a way to make a good team without paying for guys who are 65% true shooters, and instead finding these like mid upper 50s guys who can also maybe handle the ball. When you look at the Hawks players handling grades, they're not great. Like, it's not like it's A, but there's really no D's and F's. And I think we probably see a lot of teams in the RBSL just absolutely riddled with D's and F's, which might be tanking it. Everybody on the Hawks is just like, it's B's and C's. It might be like 1A. So, super interesting. I still don't love the Hawks. I definitely don't think they're beating the Jazz or the Sonics. But they get to play the Wizards, and the Wizards are kind of a shell of a team this season. There are a couple guys. Arlie Carey has just like stuck around forever, and I just want to shout him out because maybe I've been a little harsh, but he's been that midget who could that never gets talked about. I think the problem for Brian is like too late to move him. He would have been a great guy to move as part of like the like when you were moving Timmy Hamilton. But Arlie Carey's okay. Kendrick Gomez is in this vast tier of like second level centers, right? I think there's maybe 4 like elite mega centers, and then there's just this like vast array of guys who are like, oh yeah, I can give you 15 to 20 points on roughly 60% true shooting and be like a B level and all the other stuff. Gomez is one of those guys. He's okay. Suttle's aging. He gets blocks. The Wizards squad isn't super inspiring. I think from the Hawks perspective, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. I think the Wizards defense is not fantastic. Will that Suttle's Gomez front court stop Granny? It's very possible. But then it's just like there's a bunch of these like mid 3-point guys on the Hawks squad. Keegan Murray, Jamel Abraham, even Jason Jackson might put a couple up, although he's pretty dead. I just like those guys are going to be tough to make worse. But because I don't love the Wizards perimeter guys and I don't love their offense, I just think the Hawks will kind of overpower the Wiz. I'm going to go with, I don't know if it's going to be a 4-1 or a 4-2. I think I'll go 4-2 for this because I don't love either of these teams. This is kind of the state of the East. So the Hawks roll. Watch those Hawks turnover numbers. Could be interesting. Are they going to put up like multiple games with under 10 turnovers? I think very possible. Meanwhile, we're probably going to see like the Sonics turn the ball over 20 times repeatedly. Okay, next. We have the Heat versus the Nets. I think this is a correct 4-5. There's a little mishmash of those mid-ratings guys. Yes, the Heat have one game better than the Nets, so this is a correctly listed 4-5. The Heat are good. Honestly, the fact that the Heat only did this well, I think they had a little bit of bad luck in the regular season. They have a plus-minus of 10, and they are one game better than the Nets, who had a plus-minus of 3. So, big difference statistically here. The Nets are a little tough to grade because they obviously have been churning and burning a lot during the regular season. But this Heat squad has a lot of really good players. Most notably, it's got Tekashi, and Tekashi has just put a vintage Tekashi season in the books, maybe his best ever. I don't know about best ever, but just all of his seasons are great, right? He's scoring almost 20 points a game efficiently, right? He's a fantastic passer, and he's an elite, tall as fuck, athletic, like one of the best perimeter defenders in the game. So you combine that with kind of the second tier guys like American and Menethil. And the American Menethil front court, I do not love it. I would have loved it if Alex could have moved on from American by now. Menethil, I get. All right, he's very athletic. He's got that A-posty. He's a good rebounder. He takes inside shots. Like, will he cross? Is he over the Gel Atogis line, or is he just a Gel Atogis type? At 6'10", he's a little taller. I like that. He's got the good, like, that A jump. So I'm willing to kind of believe, like, Arthas is actually generally pretty good. And if he could just make 75 instead of 65% of his free throws, he'd probably be great. American, he's just jump shotty. He's only a B on defense. It's too late now. He's 31. He's got one more contract year. You're basically stuck. But I just never have liked him, and I think his playoff efficiency numbers show why I hate him. It's just like, at the best, you could call it inconsistent, and at the worst, you would just say it's very bad. However, against the Nets, it'll be against I don't know. The Nets have an aging, but maybe good front court. Carmichael Brown, Claudio Villanueva. Both at their peaks, beyond elite defenders in their own rights. At this point, the athleticism is a little lacking, but the ratings still appear to be A. So it'll be interesting to see if this Heat front court can crack the front court of the Nets. I definitely think Arthas on Claudio could go well for Arthas. I know Claudio's AA, but Claudio always got away with it by being like super duper, well, in my mind, I assumed it was super duper A+, because Claudio's not particularly tall. He's 6'10". He's not particularly athletic, and it's only gone down now. So it'll be like there's enough in Arthas' favor now where he might not be stopped too much. And then for Carmichael Brown, look, American isn't the best offensive guy, so it doesn't take much for Carmichael Brown to stop him. Carmichael Brown is just kind of like, again, the athleticism question. Like I think I've seen him at F+ quickness at some points this season, so that could be tough. In the front courts, the Nets don't really have a defender for Takashi. The defender is going to be Timmy Hamilton, but Timmy Hamilton is like a B defender at this point, and it's just having to start Timmy Hamilton is tough because he is such a drain on your offense, right? He is just an awful chucker. Like, Timmy Hamilton could get lucky from three a couple games, and that's the only way he's going to save your offense. At the end of the day, I think Timmy will chuck the Nets offense out of it, and Takashi will be like the big problem for the Nets. So I like the Heat in this one. It'll be interesting to see how Jalen Williams does. I don't really think Jalen Williams is much more than just like he's like Benedict Mathurin, kind of these like meme, like, oh, he's useless, but he can maybe, if you decide to focus your entire team around him, get you, no, not 23. I'd like 2 games, please. He can maybe get you some points, but he doesn't do anything else. Talking about Jalen Williams, who I know Idowin has like decided is going to be his pet project for the season, who I don't love. All right, next up we have the number 2 Pacers versus number 7 Magic. So the Pacers are obviously coming into this season the expected favorites to win the East and go to the finals. And in a lot of ways, I think they remain that. Like, I think the Pacers went way under the mean when it comes to winning and losing. Their margins look the best, although out of anyone in the East, I should say it's 16 points. It's a little fake because they're also in the worst conference. So the Hawks at 14.2 versus the Pacers at 16.2. The Hawks very well may be the best in the conference. Like, I'm just speaking purely mathematically. But the Central Division is just the worst division in basketball. So the Pacers get a little bump from getting to play a lot of games against a lot of really bad teams. All that being said, this is a great team. This is the exact same Pacers team as last season. The big difference is everybody's a little older, and for some people that really hurt. That some people, specifically being Joe Sandberg. And then the one big change was the addition of Victor Bart. So Kyle sold his future soul, most notably Lucky Buckner, who I really liked as a young player, and I think if I was like gonna rework the team, I would have probably have kept Lucky Buckner and Wendell Moore and been like, okay, this is like the beginning of a backcourt. Figure out some front court players, like you got to trade, churn, tank, I don't know. But I would have liked to keep Lucky. He sells Lucky for Victor Bart. So now he has this kind of crazy shot blocking big man duo with obviously the idea of being stopping Rycourt. The question is, will he get to Rycourt so we can see? I do think he will get past the first round because I just don't think the Magic are a fantastic team. And still, even though Joe Sandberg's a little old, that combo of Joe Sandberg, Wendell Moore, and Shane Sullivan they're just good. I don't think Wendell Moore is turning into this mega player like Kyle might have hoped, but he's still rock solid. The Magic, on the other hand, have some interesting players, but not necessarily guys I love for the playoffs. The main offense is coming from Shaedon Sharpe. I don't love Shaedon Sharpe. I don't hate him. Shaedon Sharpe continues to. I was hoping to see a trend in either an upwards direction or a downwards direction after last season so I could make a decision on Shaedon. Instead, he performed at the exact same level, making it hard for me to decide how I feel. If Shaedon is like this, he could be the third best player on a team, second best player on a team, and maybe not ruin you. But he is probably the best player on the Magic. There are some other guys like Milan Garrett and Chase Martinez who I think offer maybe more as total players. But Shaedon is getting the ball the most. And so this team will go as Shaedon goes. And I think with that in mind, it's just going to be a bumpy ride. Shaedon is going to have maybe a game where he goes for 40, but he's also going to have a game where he goes 5 for 25. At the end of the day, Shaedon's going to get probably stuck with a tough matchup. I think if you're Jake, you definitely want to be playing Shaedon at the point guard because the natural spot for the Pacers would be to put Shane Sullivan at that spot. Shane Sullivan, although he gets steals, is a midget who doesn't play good defense. So you at least force the Pacers to kind of switch things up. I think realistically, you just put Wendell Moore or Joe Sandberg at the point guard slot and your problem's kind of solved. They're both pretty ideal matchups for Shaedon. They got the size and the athleticism. Joe Sandberg's losing the athleticism a little bit. Wendell Moore only has Bs, but they're way better than Shane. There's also an element of just like, fuck it, run your regular team. If you're the Pacers, you have a margin of almost over 10. That's usually enough to just steamroll a team. I don't think Milan Garrett is going to crack what is the best defensive front court in the league. And for Jake, unfortunately, his big Magic sixth man is Zong Fang, who I love, by the way, but has just received a terrible matchup against Cantor Bakwa and Victor Bart. So all in all, this one seems like it's probably one of the least competitive series in the East. I think the Pacers will roll. I don't know if I'll just go 4-0 on this one. I think the Magic just ran into a bit of a tough matchup. The Magic will probably, if the Magic wanted to succeed, I would have been looking for a team that had very heavy index on the perimeter defense, and I would have told the Magic or Jake, I would be like bench Shaedon and just start Zong Fang and just go inside Zong Fang, Thomas Line, Milan Garrett. I think Chase Martinez likes to go inside as well, so it just kind of works nice. Instead, Jake has this team that likes to go inside and then has one chucker. It'll be tough. Pacers roll. All right, we have the 76ers versus the Celtics. 76ers, the 3-seed final East matchup. The Sixers sold out big to put together this team kind of like because the East is weak. And if you just look at the seeding, getting the third seed, you could say went pretty well. I think the Sixers I wouldn't say they were big beneficiaries of luck. They narrowly edged out the Heat. They had to get that 3 seed. Not that it would have made a difference because playing the Nets, I feel like, is the same as playing the Celtics. 8.6 differential, so they were winning games in a somewhat real division, I would say. And this is the all-offense team, right? So the 76ers, I think they're the second best offense in the league. I'm just going to double-check that. Yep, they're the second best offense in the league. And they're really along with the Jazz, in a class of their own. The next best teams, the Nuggets, Thunder, Pacers, Hawks, Sonics, all kind of exist like 3 points down the line. And it's not hard to see why this team is so good offensively. I mean, you just go top to bottom. Everybody is an offensively oriented player, and there are a few kind of like top-tier scorers here. Bubba Day might be a great scorer. It's going to be interesting to see. He's actually kind of the future of this franchise. Not clear how good he'll be in these playoffs, but it'll be interesting to watch. Omer Rosenberg, obviously the big gel-style scorer. How will he do in the playoffs is the question on my mind. I don't know if it's on everybody's mind. I think not against the Celtics, but if he gets up against the Pacers, it will get ugly very fast. And then Richard Pollard, just an amazing scorer. He's one of my favorite, if you're going to commit to just not playing defense and you wanted like one guy who did that, because I don't think you want more than one guy who does that, Pollard would be one of my favorite picks. And then some very good passers. There's, I think he was the FIBA guy, right? Lytris, he came from FIBA. I'm looking at his player page. He only has one season on the books. So it's not hard to see why this team scores so well. The only person on basically this entire roster who plays any defense is Jabari Smith. And even he is just mid. Um, so, you know, the good news for Jack is that the Celtics are not a super tough matchup. The Celtics are a team that, like, how they won 48 games is not super clear to me. Their ratings look like shit. The only player on this entire team who has felt like did anything positive was Diana Taurasi, who had a breakout offensive season. Honestly, if you ignore the defensive side and you just look at net scoring, I mean, in terms of guard scoring, it goes like Randy Brown, Michael Lewis, and then maybe Diana Taurasi, her or Richard Pollard. It's like kind of crazy. And she came out of nowhere. She had a solid season, but I mean, everything went up. Efficiency way up, volume way up. It scaled nicely. So there might be something there for Gasper. But beyond that, I just hate this team. The big men are all trash. And so against Jack, that's going to be super relevant because Omer Rosenberg is going to be getting the rock in the paint a lot. And I just don't think Cumtown Classic and Jesus Veloso are going to do anything about it. They're not the worst defense in the game, but like they ain't good either. So I think that plus the fact that the Celtics outside of Diana Taurasi just don't have anybody I really like. I think the Sixers will move on. Might be a little rocky, but I'm still feeling a pretty good cruise from the Sixers, and I don't think there's a lot of matchup stuff to discuss here. I think Omer Rosenberg will do quite well. And Diana Taurasi, just like, I don't think she's getting the volume to quite be great. If I'm going to optimize this and I'm Jack, I'd probably just move Jabari Smith into that shooting guard spot. Jabari Smith, he's quick and he's tall as fuck. Could be a good matchup for Taurasi, and Pollard can do just fine at small forward. So this is probably a good matchup. But yeah, I think the Sixers will cruise. So I think we got chalk in the East. Let's go to the West. We have the number 2 Supersonics versus the number 7 Timberwolves. So the Sonics, another season in the books, is looking pretty good. The big difference for the Sonics is just like the old guard has been completely removed. Wilt Nichols gone. Although he did put up a reasonable season wherever he is. I think he's on the Thunder now. Augusto Celestino, basically bench 0 minutes. And then Ney is actually still chipping away as this like insane efficiency guy at very few minutes. But in the stead of those guys, Seth Charles and Michael Lewis have both upped their game. Seth Charles has become one of the highest volume efficient scorers in the game. And Michael Lewis has had the breakout season. I know there were less knowledgeable GMs who were scoffing at the Michael Lewis as the 8th best player, whatever the hell I put him at. But he definitely had a prove-it season. I mean, his stats are just insane now. Like, the volume needs to go up to really ever be in contention as, like, an MVP guy. But, I mean, he just did 21 points on 65% true shooting. And 65% true shooting for a guard is just lunacy. And it's not like 21 points per game is low volume. I'm pretty sure he's well into the top 25 in terms of scorers. Yeah, he's 20th. So, like, it's a dangerous combo that the Sonics have. Like I said earlier, if it wasn't for the existence of kind of this freak anomaly that is the Jazz, the Sonics would be favored for a lot of these seasons. And when you go beyond the top 2 guys who are both like top 10 players in the league, the role players for the Sonics might even be the best part about this team. I mean, Gerard McWhorter is just one of the best utility point guards in the league, I feel like. Jason Treble is one of the best low usage centers / power forwards in the league. And then when you go beyond the first tier role players like that, there's just a lot of guys who are still I mean, JD Davison is a 6th man offensive guy, crazy. And he's getting 14 minutes or 15 minutes a game on this team. Handy Yaman is a small forward. Randall McClellan coming off the bench. I mean, this team is so deep. It's so good. I just say this all kind of bittersweetly as it's a shame that the Jazz have to exist. But maybe the Sonics have a shot. The Sonics have a matchup against the Timberwolves, the great Olin Harris experiment. I think if we're going to grade how the Olin Harris experiment went, it went how everybody expected. We all kind of laughed at the time, said it's not going to go well. It did not go well. It's not hard to see why. This team is a total mess. Olin is amazing, and he did drag this team to the playoffs, so it wasn't like a total flop. But this team's offense is kind of a mess. They have no big man defense. They don't really do any one thing particularly well. Yeah, how that pertains to how we'll look against the Sonics. All right, so Seth Charles is going to just destroy the Timberwolves. I think the big problem for the Timberwolves is like, okay, you could maybe, if you look really closely, at the Timberwolves, convince yourself that Khalifa Diop is not like the worst person to have against Seth Charles, right? 7 feet tall, reasonably like plus athleticism, A plus posty. But the problem is that Seth Charles could absolutely be switched with Jason Treble to be either power forward or center. And there is no second guy on this team that does anything well defensively in the paint for the Timberwolves. Like, I think they've been playing Moussa Diabate, and like now we're talking about like a B post defender. And not only a B post defender, but he likes to take the ball a fair amount. So it's like, if you put a good defender on Moussa Diabate, does he harm your offense? I don't know. There's a reason Moussa was a D-leaguer until now, and now he's not. All that being said, gonna be a tough day in the office. What you do with Olin is a big question if you're the Timberwolves. He's been playing Olin at point guard the entire time. I've never been a big fan of Olin at point guard. You can see the shooting efficiency numbers took a massive hit this season. I would love Olin at power forward, irrespective of what the matchup is. I have like, if Olin has to play against Jason Treble, if he has to play against Seth Charles, whatever. I just think Olin is an AAA guy. Like, that type of athleticism scales great, and he'll be mad efficient at the power forward slot. At the end, I just don't think anything will change the fact that they're about to get waxed by the Sonics. I think there might be like these weird signs of false hope, because what I think will happen, if you look at the regular season between these two teams, Sonics won 2-1. The two Sonics wins were blowouts. I think they won by 40 and by 20, and then the Timberwolves won one by 5, and they won one by 5 exactly how you would expect. Olin Harris, 30-point triple-double. Like, I think that will... If you're the Timberwolves, you just need to pray you get that. I think there's a better chance of getting that if you put Olin at the power forward position. I do think no matter what happens, he might get 1 or 2 of these. So, do I give them 2 just because of Olin? I think I'll go 1. I truly believe that. Although I do think there may be like, even in Seattle, this like, whoa, Timberwolves got 1, and then they're going to go and lose by 50. So I think the Timberwolves would be very up and down. No one wants to play Olin in the playoffs, but I just don't think Olin alone is enough. All right, next we have the Nuggets versus Clippers. This is your certified banger series of round 1. I am so excited for this series. If you were watching the playoffs last season, you know we got this exact same matchup, round 1. I don't remember if the seeds were the same. Doesn't matter. But the Clippers were putting it on the Nuggets until a freak injury to Mike Mortar came and kind of derailed everything. Now, Mike Mortar is healthy. We get round 2. Can Doc redeem himself in a battle for who the next amazing young center is? Rycourt excluded. The Nuggets lost Skeeter Jones. Otherwise, the team remains mostly the same. Look, Lester McQuaid is amazing. He's like arguably the best center that isn't Rycourt. In fact, I don't think arguably. I think he is the best center that isn't Rycourt right now. All around, he can do absolutely everything. Ariagato has had a little career year, pulling it all together before age catches up to her. She's been wildly efficient, just absolutely lighting it up from 3. And then Matthew Dorsey is a fine power forward. I think he could be a liability against some of these teams that are running like 7-foot power forwards. Rycourt, cough. But there are worse options to have a power forward. You could have Moussa Diabate, for example. So the Nuggets, beyond that, I do not love. This is the whole problem with losing Skeeter, right? Is they basically had this exact same team with an elite shooting guard / small forward to go with it. Instead, it's Erskine Abdul and the corpse of Francois Santoro taking those reps. And I just don't love them, right? They just don't. They're these kind of chucky guys that might play okay defense. Oh, why am I clicking on WhatsApp? Sorry about that. So the rest of this Nuggets roster, not great. However, the top of this Nuggets roster is quite good. Lester is so good. When we go to the Clippers, kind of a similar vibe for the Clippers. I think the Clippers, they have Mike Mortar, obviously. Mike Mortar, I don't know if he's gotten the cred that McQuaid has, and that's for fair reason, because prior to this season, he didn't really quite have the volume of McQuaid. Now that he's getting the volume of McQuaid, the stats are looking shockingly similar. It's very interesting. I know McQuaid is scoring 5 more points per game, but that could easily be fixed if the Clippers would just cut garbage-ass Elliot Thomas, who we'll talk about in a second. But he's getting 2.5 blocks per game. like in that kind of 61% true shooting-ish realm. He's almost at 10 boards. I think he's at 9 boards. Honestly, I'm surprised he doesn't get more. And then outside of Mike Mortar, there are a couple guys that I like on this team. Sierski is great. I love Sierski as a just general shooting guard, small forward who needs to, be a little 3-and-D. He's great. I don't think he'll ever be a good player as your second or maybe even third best player on the team, which the problem is he kind of arguably is for the Clippers. But it's not like he's bad to have. It's just that you need more talent. He's never going to be a fantastic scorer. He had that one crazy season last season for Seattle where he was surrounded by a lot of other mega scorers. So I think it's kind of a rising tide lifts all boats type of situation. Now he's kind of back to that mid-55s. But you can take 55% from a three-point guy who should scale well into the playoffs and is a god-tier defender. Then the team kind of goes off the rails. Victor Sandeep, fine. I'm okay with the Victor Sandeep, Z-Money, backcourt, like super low usage, reasonably good defense. But God, do I hate Elliot Thomas. I think this is one of the worst acquisitions Doc made. He's Zachetology to a fucking T. If this dude didn't get 1.7 steals, he should be in the D League. I mean, he is a ball hog to the highest degree, and he's only shooting at 57% true shooting. He's got a below 1 ATO. The type of shots he takes are just awful. There's nothing I like about him. He's 6'7", so it won't scale in the playoffs. I mean, it didn't even scale in the regular season, for crying out loud. So I don't get why Doc plays Elliot Thomas. I think Elliot Thomas should either be explicitly given bench minutes. He was a full-time starter for the Clips this season with the hope that he gets weaker matchups, or completely benched. And then the other guy I don't like on this team, although less so because he has less of a role, is Benedict Mathurin. Look, I get the sexy appeal of Mathurin, but at the end of the day, all he's going to give you is empty points at not even an efficient enough clip to like be good, right? He finished the season 57.7% true shooting. That's like fine, except when you consider the fact that he plays zero defense and he doesn't get any rebounding and he just doesn't do anything for you. He's like a passer at least, but still, I don't like Mathurin. And if you sign Mathurin in the future, you got to remember, as we've seen, he's going to demand insane extension deals, so you're never even going to get like long-term value out of him. So if I'm Doc trying to beat Evan, I think at the end of the day, there's not a ton you do because both these teams are pretty thin. I would definitely be benching Elliot Thomas. Evan has absolutely nobody to be like a high-volume guy in the small forward position. I mean, you could argue that you could move Erskine Abdul, who is a high-volume guy, there. But he's just not very good in the first place, so putting a more mid player on him doesn't impact you too much. And I think we just let the fireworks go. We get to see Mike Mortar versus Lester McQuaid. I'm hype as hell for that. I think it's going to be a dead standstill. My constant problem I've seen with McQuaid is that he doesn't do great against other elite centers. He was losing in the playoffs last season to Mike Mortar, and then did the Nuggets get swept by the Sonics last season? I think they did. And Seth Charles had some good games. Maybe it was 4-1. In either case, not great playoff showings from McQuaid. When I look at the ratings, I think he could do well. But now's a great chance to prove it. I think this one goes 7, and home court is the determining factor here. I think outside of the center matchup, my big concern if I'm Evan is Sierski, right? It would be really frustrating. Erskine Abdul is scoring 23 points per game. That's a lot of points per game that's not efficient. And you add on a Sierski matchup to that, it could get dark fast. So the same way I want Elliot Thomas to be benched by the Clippers, I think I might be benching Erskine Abdul if I'm the Nuggets. Give Teofilo Cabral or one of those more defendy, low-scorey types the ball and let your centers go to cook on both sides. This is like a mirror match. I'm super hype. Okay, 4-5 in the West, Rockets Thunder. The Rockets are a weird team in transition. Obviously, they started the season with guys like Shaedon Sharpe and Victor Bart, and they no longer have them. However, getting rid of them doesn't mean I hate this team. This team definitely got worse for this immediate season. That goes without saying. I like this team a lot for the future. I think Bryant made a bunch of great moves that, like, if I was in his position, I would have moved. The youth on this team, who is not necessarily quite ready, is great. I love Denver Bradford. I really like Lucky Buckner. And then there are some other guys who are kind of more purely interesting, and we'll see how they're pan out, like Richard Johnson, who TBD. In terms of what we get today, this is kind of Julian Bouie's team now. As weird as that is to say. Julian Bouie, who is that? Good question you might ask. He's this random, super tall, mega athlete who's putting in 17 points per game on unbelievable efficiency. He's going to be leading this team. I think, Lucky Buckner will shoot the ball for this team a lot, but I don't know if he'll do it efficiently. He's not quite there yet. We'll see if he ever gets there. And then other guys like Richard Johnson is going to get the ball a lot, but Richard Johnson is highly flawed. He is a foul machine. I would be very worried. And then Denver Bradford is a great anchor, but he's just not fully realized yet. So I don't think he's going to be stopping anything at a super high level. He's kind of a net neutral at this point. So kind of a weird, unclear how good they will perform type of team. Since the trade, the Rockets have still been a winning team because they made all these trades about halfway through the season. But they have not been winning at the same rate as they were before. I think at their absolute peak, they were like 30-12, and then they made these trades, and then they finished the season 56-13. So they went 26-14. So they they were winning almost at a 3-1 clip, and then they started winning at less than a 2-1 clip. Not the worst thing in the world. Still solid. The Thunder have been an okay squad all season. A very athletic team, just like full of tall, mega athletes. I'm talking players like Henry Piercy, very athletic. Jalen Duren, quite athletic. Morris, quite athletic. And then some solid role players. Frederick Jones. I don't know if Frederick Jones, what the deal with his situation is, but he kind of took a step back in a lot of ways this season. I expected more from him being moved off the Jazz, especially from a scoring perspective. His efficiency was good, but I definitely thought he would be putting up like 17 or 18 points per game instead of 9 points per game on the Thunder. But he's a great passer. And then Wilt Nichols on the bench is still 7'4", so he puts the ball in hoop quite well. Finished the season 63% true shooting. In terms of how this matchup goes, I worry for the Rockets. I mean, I don't even know if the Rockets should be favored because of all the trades their team made, but the Thunder like to go inside, right? Morris is a guard who attacks the inside. Henry Piercy, mega inside only guy. Wilt Nichols, obviously inside attacking force. Jalen Duren is obviously a fucking center, so all he's going to do is go inside. Most of this team is oriented to only go inside. There's not a single guard on this team that's outside oriented that has any volume at all. There's all these guys, Frederick Jones, Jaden Ivey, Sergi, Henry Nicholson. Like, they are more outside oriented guys, but none of them are even scoring 10 points a game. So it's going to be a lot about the inside attack in this matchup. And the problem is Denver Bradford's okay, but his compatriot in the paint is going to be Richard Johnson, who, while his ratings are quite sexy, as I mentioned, is an absolute foul machine. I think we might be seeing a lot of Richard Johnson foul outs in our future. The big X factor for the Rockets is Thomas McDonald. I've loved Thomas McDonald his entire career. He's no longer he's gone from green to yellow. But being 7'6", even if you aren't an athlete, and a 7'6" guy who gets blocks can be impactful. So the real question is, how do you feel about an unathletic 7'6" guy being what your team relies on to stop a better team? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I kind of think I like the Thunder in this one, but they have a lot to overcome, specifically home court advantage. So I think this will be another toss-up series, although I like the Thunder to pull off our one upset, 4-3. I do think Piercy is going to be the big problem, right? Piercy, he likes the power forward slot. He's an awful matchup for Richard Johnson. And then if you get to the point where you're like moving Denver Bradford to the power forward and Thomas McDonald to the center spot, then it's like, who's your backup? Is it Richard Johnson, or are you moving Richard Johnson small forward? It really throws the entire Rockets team into a bit of a weird limbo state. So it's tough. The other guy who I haven't mentioned is Iman Dubar. And Iman Dubar is just not good at anything anymore. So I've kind of omitted him because I just am assuming, because he hasn't gotten a single minute all season, that he will not be getting a minute anymore. So I like the Thunder to move on this one. Again, not super surprising given everything that's happened with the Rockets. All right, finally we have the Jazz versus the Suns. Look, the Jazz are insane. Rycourt is obviously the best scorer in the league, but what you might not have noticed is that Randy Brown has put in a career season, and he looks amazing. His efficiency is off the charts. It's fucking ridiculous. Okay, maybe not a career season because I forgot how good his season was last season, but he's fucking ridiculous. So, like, if you consider not just, like, if when you go to rate players for who are the top players of the season, and you ignore how good a player would be in their situation, and you just think of, like, how good they are in a vacuum, and you might say, like, well, Olin is amazing because, like, even though the Timberwolves are wasting him away, we've seen when he's put in a good situation, he can be great. If you just look at statistics for this season, it's hard to not argue that Randy Brown and Rycourt are literally players number 1 and players number 2, and they're on the same team. And this team also has Chance Roman, who did quite well, and a lot of really solid... I don't think I like the Jazz's role players quite as much as the Sonics, but I'd much rather have the number 1 and number 2 players in the league than I would have really good role players. These Jazz are a machine. I don't think they'll lose a single game to any team except maybe the Sonics these entire playoffs. And the Suns are not going to be the team to beat them. Look, to talk about the Suns briefly, the Jason experiment, to me, this was a classic example of having the potential to have a good team and just a refusal to make the moves. I mean, all these guys at various points, DeVillers, Sakaguchi, Carlitos Felipe, DeMarcus Bunton, like, I know for a fact that at least 3 of these guys have gotten, like, various offers at various points. And Jason's approach to this, I think, was always like, I'm going to keep holding because they might pop. And I think the thing you got to always accept is that it's almost never going to happen. And 90% of the time, you should probably be moving the guy. As someone who has always taken the approach after being burned of moving the guy at this point, you got to take guys who are not, like, supposed to be the man and try and let them pop. And the guys who are supposed to be the man, like, that have the mainstream appeal and they're young, those are the guys you usually want to move, right? Like, Michael Lewis came out of nowhere. He was just some dumb MLE acquisition. It's sick that he popped. But other top guys, like Matty Dorsey, those are the guys who have the value. You want to be trading them. So all that is to say is it's a little frustrating to watch this Suns team be basically fucked at this point. The contracts are terrible. The picks are gone. It's all dead. It just feels like, I don't know. Jason had a lot of potential with this squad. Like, I liked the draft picks he made generally, but he did nothing, it felt like, except make draft picks. The Suns are going to get swept. And that's not even intended as, like, disrespect to the Suns. The Jazz are just absurd. When we get to the second round, I think we'll get some interesting stuff. I would love to see the Heat versus the Hawks. I would love to see the Pacers versus the 76ers because I think they'll absolutely wax them. I'll talk about it in round 2. The Nuggets versus the Sonics, a little redemption. Maybe Clippers versus Sonics. I don't know. I truly think that Nuggets-Clippers is a toss-up. And then I think we'll see the Jazz continue to steamroll their way to the Western Conference Finals. Those are my picks. That is Zachetology. Thank you for watching. Let's hope Monday is a banger. Enjoy your NFL games. Go Seahawks and Toodles.